Hey guys, how's it going? Kripperino here. Today I want to talk about a very important topic that you don't really see directly addressed, and basically it is how do you win in Hearthstone? And this is a very broad subject that is usually dealt with in very specific cases, and the very specific cases are very appropriate for constructed play because knowing just cards in your deck, cards in your opponent's deck, if it's a good matchup, if it's a bad matchup, knowing how to manage your risk, knowing how to mulligan, all this information is out there for that kind of stuff. So if you're playing Face Hunter, you can basically look up a guide for your deck that will tell you how to play against this other class. And all this mechanic, all this knowledge is basically almost completely useless when it comes to Arena, and when it comes to trying out new things in Constructed. A lot of this stuff has to do with vast experience, but I feel I have a good enough understanding that I can give you guys kind of the framework of understanding your win condition in a game. And I think this is the single biggest factor when it comes to doing well in Arena. And more or less doing well with a very new deck. So let's get to that. Let's get to like the very basic principles in Arena. So first you have to understand what you have. So you're gonna draft a deck. Often you have some control over your deck, but most of the time you don't have much. You generally just pick good cards as you see them. For a lot of it, there is quite a bit of decision making, but if you have some practice, if you go to websites that basically tell you what card is best, a lot of people will draft in a very similar fashion these days. But what's important to know is when you look at your deck, how does it fit? So here I have, kind of a curve, and you can see the white line I put. The white line is what I would consider these days to be a normalized curve. Most decks that are considered good have where the white line is. So if you see bars bulging out in the later half of the curve, it basically means that you have a slightly slower than average deck. So it's really important to know that when it comes to developing win condition, because if you have a slower than average deck, you might need to mulligan slightly more aggressively for early game. If you have a really slow deck, if you have like the flatline deck, you basically have to scrap everything for like a 2-drop. Okay? These days, it's not forgiving if you skip a 2-drop, especially if you skip a 3-drop as well. So if you want a practical example, let's say you're playing Mage, let's say you're going first, and let's say your opening hand is Water Elemental and 2 like 8-drops. You're obviously getting rid of the 8-drops, right? But if you have a faster than average deck, you can actually keep the Water Elemental because you're very likely to draw cards that you can play before it. But if you have a slower than average deck, or even I'd say an average deck, you need to get rid of that Water Elemental because the chances of you drawing actual early game are fairly low. Even though 4, is a huge turning point in the game, these days it might actually be too slow, especially in some particular matchups for you to be able to do that. So you kind of have to adjust your play accordingly. The second part is how good is your deck? Like in terms of card quality, while you might have a really good curve, you might just have cards that are considered garbage. And if you've played Arena a little bit, you probably know exactly what they are. They're basically cards with very terrible stats, and they're not always terrible. I do examples every now and then. Force Tank Max is a very good example. Force Tank Max is an excellent Arena card, and it's an unplayable constructed card. So some cards in constructed are really bad, but they're good in Arena. But cards that are really, really, really bad in constructed are generally really, really bad in Arena. But some exceptions are like Preparation. Preparation's a really bad card because cards in Arena kind of have to give value by themselves unless you're running a combo deck, which is very unusual, but we're not going to get into that today. The other part is based on your class and based on the deck that you have to understand what you're going to be strong and what you're going to be weak against. And it mostly has to do with what you're going to be weak against, because if you are the underdog in a matchup, at least class-wise, it's very important to take additional risk because you will need to get at least a little bit lucky to win that matchup. So now it's pretty difficult to really go over all the classes, how they match up, how they play, all that kind of stuff, especially because there's so many, the stream of details is basically endless. So I'll be talking here literally forever, but I'm going to go over the classes and what I typically see from these classes once I get to like the 7+ win bracket. Before 7+ wins, you basically expect anything, but still more than likely you will expect these type of decks to come out from each of the classes. And this mostly has to do with playing against them. So some people have their own strategy and all that, which is very subjective. But when it comes to playing against players, I think there is a fairly good understanding about how a typical player, or like when you face a mage, typically what a mage has when it's a good mage deck at 7 wins. So let's start with that. Let's start with mage. Let's start in the classes in order that you tend to face them in arena. So mage decks often are going to be the mage decks that survive to like 7 wins. They're going to be ones with like Flame Strike, and they're basically going to be slightly slower than average. They're not likely to have too crazy of an opener, and if they do, you're probably going to get absolutely destroyed. Basically, the way that they're going to try to play is they're going to try to greed you out and have some cards left at the end when you don't. The way you play against that is you try to rush them as much as you can in the early game. In the early game is when 1 health creatures are super powerful, if you can play them in multitudes, because you pretty much steal a lot of their tempo. You prevent them from playing their mid game because they have to use their hero power, and if they don't have much early game to begin with, you can basically roll them over in some cases. If you make it to the late game and you're not playing a late game deck, you have to be extremely greedy with damage because you will not win a control game. If you're playing a slower deck than mage, well, you probably are a very specific type of deck and you know what you're doing. If you're playing against the Paladin, I think Paladin is actually one of the hardest ones to predict because a Paladin can play rush, a Paladin can play mid-range, a Paladin can play control, a Paladin can play control with like super control with draw and a lot of healing and stuff. So really the only thing that you can expect a Paladin to have at high number of wins is just high quality cards, okay? So on turn 2, it's fairly likely they will have Shielded Minibot. On turn 4, it's fairly likely they will have either True Silver or Kings. If they have one of these like super powerful cards, you might lose because it's like a huge tempo swing when it's perfect. So you have to just try to do your best to play around these very few cards so you don't get tempoed out by a Paladin. And Paladin mostly plays out in the form of board control. If they don't have board control, their trades will suck, but if they do have board control, you will get destroyed. So your goal is to try to take board control from the Paladin and don't let them develop tempo. Warlocks, these days are playing very zoo-ish decks, mostly because Imp Gang Boss kind of pushes them over the edge in the zoo deck. Warlock decks are going to have a far lower curve than the average deck because of the Warlock hero power. And basically, the way that you win is most Warlock decks, just like in Constructed, that play the Zoo theme, don't have a way to reset the board. So your goal is to take the board at all costs, because once you have board control, not only is it difficult for them to take it back, but also you're the one pushing damage into their face, and they're not going to be able to use their hero power. So often it doesn't matter if you lose value. It doesn't matter if they 2-for-1 you, even though they're going to have more value in the late game. You have to go all in as fast as possible against Warlock decks, especially the ones at high amount of wins, unless, you are the mage and you have a lot of board clears and you feel confident. There's exceptions to each of these rules, but this is the general idea. Rogue is generally going to have a lot of super tempo cards in the first few turns. They're going to basically start the game with board control, and they're going to make that switch of controlling the board to going face fairly early compared to most classes. So again, kind of like Zoolock, your goal is to, at all costs, stay in the game. They're probably going to win the board control battle anyway, but if it's close, they might not be able to push for much damage, and you might be able to win back the game after that point. Shaman is a fairly popular class at high amount of wins, but it's usually there because the people just drafted ridiculous decks. Shaman in Arena just is a class that if you have a lot of ridiculously powerful cards, you're going to do really well, and now they have 2 ridiculous powerful cards. They have not only Fire Elemental, but also Fire Guard Destroyer, and there isn't much play, compared at least Paladin, where, yeah, a Shaman, you kind of want to have board control, because just the same as Paladin, they're going to have way favorable trades if they have board control, and because of that, they're going to be weak to board clears. But you just have to watch out. On turn 4, there will be a Fire Guard Destroyer. On turn 6, there will be a Fire Elemental. On turn 7, there might be a Fire Elemental. On turn 8 and 9, there might be more Fire Elementals. That's just the reality. Often you're in a helpless situation because they just drafted ridiculous cards. Yes, you can do really well with Shaman in Arena, but generally the players who get the high number of wins aren't there because they played well. They're there because they drafted a shitload amount of these ridiculously powerful common cards in Arena. Priests are going to win the late game. So priests these days will try to very aggressively play in the early game to just stay in it, and their winning condition is when they play a creature that has too much health for you to handle, because the priest hero power is basically the best hero power in the game if they successfully use it to heal for 2 every turn on a creature that has some relevance on the board. So cards like Velen's Chosen make it a bigger problem for you if you're playing against priest, and if you're playing a class that really tries to marginalize the opponent through damage like Mage. Mage matches up really poorly against Priest. You have to be a little bit extra greedy with damage. The main way that you take their superhero power advantage away from them is when they develop this, too big of a creature to handle, hopefully you're in an okay enough spot on the board to where you can start pushing for face damage. Because if they have a very powerful creature that you just can't handle, or if you handle it, you'll run out of cards, if you push for face, if you threaten just too much face damage, them healing their face doesn't really develop any value at all. So you kind of take away their hero power bonus, and as a result you need to more aggressively fight for the early game. And often it's important to realize that high number win priests, they're going to have very powerful early game cards like Dark Cultist, so it's very good to have set up on the board a way to deal with a Dark Cultist as soon as it can be played. So turn 3 or turn 2 if they went second in some cases. When you're playing against Hunter these days, who get the high number of wins, just have ridiculous face decks. So the way you play against them is, well, if you have a really controlling deck with a lot of heals, you stall them out, but you probably don't. So your goal is to draw a more aggressive hand than them and kill them before they kill you. This can be pretty hard. That's why Hunters are really fucking stupid in Arena. Just like Constructed, how about that? Druids also operate in very similar fashion with Priest. They're going to try to stall and just keep you busy and just annoy the shit out of you in the early and even mid game, and their win condition is in the late game. They can usually make it there, so they can afford to run a slightly slower deck, so they can afford to put in really big creatures. It's very important to counter these by saving some kind of removal, even if it's really tempting to remove something in the mid game, even if it seems like really good value. If you're doing well enough, your win condition will be to save that removal for when they actually play the big creatures. Also, Druid really falters against high tempo plays, just like in Hearthstone. Everywhere else, when you play a really big card, if they can remove it for much less mana, you're going to have a problem. Well, Druid doesn't have that type of removal, so not only do they get punished because they have to run big creatures when you remove them, but they're not going to be able to deal with your big creatures. So your winning condition is they play Ironbark, and then you play like Shadow Ward Death, and you play like a 5-drop. So then they're fucked. That's the idea, and you often have to set up for many turns into this win condition against a Druid. Warriors, while it is the weakest class in Arena, I think that's pretty well decided by most Arena pros, let's say. When you face a high win Warrior in Arena, it's often the scariest class because they're there because they have crazy decks. Warrior decks, they kind of vary, but most of them are going to have the win condition from just overvalue. Like, you know, they're going to get a lot of value through their weapons, and basically the mid game is theirs. Okay, so the way that you battle mid game is you either play an extremely fast game, because, you know, while weapons often do kill 2 creatures for 1 card, which is very powerful in Arena, if you're doing a lot of face damage, they might not be able to afford to use too many weapons. So even though they might have like 6 weapons in their deck, if you push for a lot of early game, a lot of pressure early on, they actually won't be able to use most of the weapons in their deck. However, if your deck is not able to push for a fast win, a fast push for damage, you have to play the super greedy, super slow, just greed, 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 as slow as possible. You know, just have something left in your hand, and they might run out of cards. If you try to play anything in between those 2 strategies, you will likely lose against a high win warrior. Now, it's very important to know these, but most of the details will come through experience. So if you want to be good, play more Hearthstone, play more Arena, and this experience will allow you to basically adapt in the middle of play, which is a very important key. It's like, you know, at this point in the game, I can push for damage. At this point in the game, I realize that, you know, the warrior's weapons are useless because he doesn't have enough life. At this point in the game, I can control the next 2 turns and can push for a very aggressive lethal unless they have, you know, this 1 card. Assessing your situation in the game is something you will have to learn on your own, because it's too general of a theme, especially in Arena. But this kind of factor is very important. This pushing for the win, realizing the only way you're going to win in that game and going for it. It's playing to win, especially when you're playing that type of deck. So Priest, for instance, will often play the play not to lose type of theme, but even in the last few turns in the game, you have to play to win. And the clips I'm going to show you guys today really highlights that, really highlights playing to win versus playing not to lose. I'm going to show you guys 2 games where I played to win and my opponent played not to lose, and this was exactly why they lost. Very interesting games. I think you guys will really gain a lot from watching them. But from these aspects, it's very important, again, to think many turns in advance, especially when you think you can close out the game, and also at, you know, a high amount of wins in Arena, it's very important to know every single card in your deck at all times. There's like some software people use, but I don't encourage that you guys use that. Just do your best and consider what you could draw to win. For instance, you know, if it looks really bleak, if you're going to lose a game unless you push for damage, if you think about your deck and like 1 out of 4 cards that are left will allow you to win next turn, well, 1 out of 4 chance to win that game is more than close to 0 when you play not to lose in that situation. So, you know, those type of arguments, those types of mental comparisons, you guys will have to make. You guys have to decide for yourselves. But I hope with this video I can put you guys 1 step closer to making that understanding, making that realization, making that choice of when to shift gears in the middle of a game in Arena to pull out some crazy wins. It's good stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed my little theory talk of the day. Enjoy the clips. Maybe you guys do a little bit better from it. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Oh, Priest matchup. That's a bad one. My hand, though, that's a good one. I'll keep Fireball. This matchup is usually bad because you lack removal.
Wanna blow something up?
It's really bad. The counter here is Northshire.
Mind if I roll need?
Oh, you fell for it. Good. Alright, we catch up on tempo and might actually win the game now.
Do you like to play with fire?
Silvermoon shall not fall.
Power flows through me. Magic detected.
That's great. So easy to deal with that. And we have 3 damage for the next card he plays.
Let us see if
Okay. That's good. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry I've been somewhat distracted today. Power word shield? Yeah, it does. Don't want a fireball though.
for the Lich King!
I think we might actually get a chance to race him. Nah, I think fireball is weak. His card doesn't trade favorably right now at all. Okay, now it does. That was bad.
Drink with me, friend.
Letting the Akanai loose has been pretty good. Akanai is mostly a value card. We're not going to win off value anyway, so who gives a shit? If the priest can't heal. Sounds good. It's a trickier game to play, but I think it's one we can win.
Minions, servants, soldiers of the court.
Look at that! We just beat this fucking deck. How the fuck else were we going to win that game? No fucking way. Zero chance to beat this guy. Let him have Akanai and go face. Boss battle.
The pleasure is mine.
This is our town, scrub. Yeah.
Our town scrub. Yep. That's okay. I didn't have a good 2-drop anyway. Not a big deal.
You love my new recipe.
That sucked. I was hoping to get 2 into creatures.
Let the pain speak to me.
I have the ooze, but it's not a great play, like tempo wise.
Get in there and fight, maggot. this apple on your head?
May my ancestors
Okay. Oh, a polymorph would be nice.
first kill.
If he has a Viscerate, we're in a lot of trouble.
Got a problem.
7, 7, 5. We have to play to win.
You call that a whip?
I think if he had Eviscerate, he would have played it. What's the draw?
Choose soon.
Sun Launcher. War Golem. Might have to try to draw our Fireball to win this one, actually. It's pretty sad. How can we get through? We can get a polymorph. By pinging face, we can draw polymorph, so we have 2 outs now. Yeah, we have 2 outs. 1 out of 6, yeah. It was basically 100%, and then we got top ticked, so.
I smell blood.
And that's how we play to win, boys.
First kill.
That is as close as it fucking gets. Yeah, we literally had to make exactly those plays to win. Good. Crap. Fine. Amazing. Yeah, of course, on EU, big payouts, right? Oh my god, we can buy 5 packs, guys. 5 fucking packs. think I have 2 equalities already. It's the shittiest packs ever. Okay. I've never used real money for packs on this account. This is free to play. If we start now, we'd ruin it. We just got 5 of the worst packs you could get. Not even 1 golden. That's so sad.